and welcome to Nerds at Church, a queer indie feminist podcast about the Bible, nerdy stuff, and the church in general. I am Pastor Kay, and my pronouns are she, her.
I'm Pastor Emily, and my pronouns are they, them, theirs. And this is not your regular episode.
You might have been able to tell.
Yeah, in case you couldn't tell. It is coming out whenever we get it scheduled. Oh, okay. There's a lot that we're going to cover. This is what we're calling a Minisode update thingy.
It's a technical term.
I don't know how we're actually going to title it. Yeah, totally. Technical term. But we've got some updates for you and some feels for you. Our first is an update on the podcast timeline. In case you couldn't tell, but hopefully you are paying enough attention to notice, we have not been doing a weekly podcast lately. Part of that is time, part of that is life that has, come up. And so we are, for the rest of the season, going to be doing an every other week podcast. So our episode 7 on John Brown, Paul's letter to Philemon, and Kira Nerys from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, mostly, came out the first week of November, which was its own whole thing. And then our next episode, we're going to try and get out. So that should hopefully give us more time and more capacity because we are doing the whole thing ourselves. And so it takes some amount of time to do the editing and then make sure that captions are right so that our podcast can be as accessible as possible. So just so you know, that's kind of what's going on in our shift for timeline for this particular season.
Right. And this is this season change. We don't know that it's going to be permanent.
Yeah. For example, if we get a bunch of Patreon supporters and can hire someone to do some of the stuff, then it'll be easier for us to do stuff. Or if we somehow get magically paid to do this.
So, we particularly wanted to do an update because the election happened, and most of our episodes for this season were recorded before the election, including several of the ones that are about to come out soon. And so we wanted to be clear with you that several of these episodes, we didn't know what was going to happen. We aren't discussing things in a post-election way because it wasn't post-election yet. And so when most of these episodes come out, they're going to be in a world where so much was not what it is now.
Yep. So, for just so you all know, our episodes 8, 9, and 11 all were recorded pre-election. So the only ones left to come out that are post-election will be episode 10, where we focus on the disability rights movement, which feels extra important in this moment. And then our final episode, which is going to be our retrospective, where we're going to look back on the whole season and what we've learned and what we've gathered about what it means to be a superhero, what it means to be a hero, and how we can deconstruct that. And probably it'll also entail some, what does it look like to be heroes in the coming years?
Yeah. And I have to say, I think this season feels extra important and relevant now because the whole aspect of heroes are not alone, heroes work together, heroes don't have to be perfect, all of that, all of the different aspects of how we get heroes wrong seems so much more important now.
Yep. Agreed. Speaking of, how are you feeling?
Or, as we used to say in clinical pastoral education, and how did that make you feel? Which became an ongoing joke. I got to ask my clinical supervisor that once, and we all just about fell out of our chairs. It was amazing. Sorry, nice. I realize a lot of folks listening probably won't get what's funny about that. But yeah, we are here because, in part, we wanted to share with you the fact that if you are stunned and frustrated and angry about the election results, you are not alone. And personally speaking, I have to say it wasn't a complete blindside. I knew there was a possibility. I found it unlikely in part because a lot of the people around me who had been Trump supporters the last time around were much quieter now and weren't talking about it, didn't have signs up, that kind of thing. And so I thought that some of them had moved or changed. And I was getting that feeling from a lot of people in a lot of conservative/rural areas. And so I came home on Tuesday night. My husband and I never watch election coverage because we did that once when we were first married, and that was a terrible idea. And so we played video games and watched Mystery Science Theater, a couple of episodes. If you want to see Lee Van Cleef making rent money and feeling really bad about what he had to do it, then Master Ninja and Master Ninja 2 are really fantastic episodes of Mystery Science Theater. And so we went to bed, and I woke up the next morning, and I checked my phone at 5:30 when the cats woke me up. And that's when I found out. And so that was a long day.
Yeah. I did watch election coverage. Pace and I attempted to... I mean, we did. We recorded one of our Patreon episodes as a way of alleviating or redirecting some of our energy from election anxiety to podcasting. It kind of went well. If you're a horror buff for Horror Nerds at Church, you'll get to hear how anxious and distracted we were. And then we watched a lot of it, and at one point I was like on the verge of having a panic attack, so I went outside and I looked at the stars, and I found Orion and discovered that Orion's left shoulder looks a little reddish, and I found Venus, and that's about all you can see in the city of Baltimore while looking up at the sky. And then I watched Coco, because I love Coco and I hadn't yet watched it this season, and fell asleep watching Coco and was woken up by people in my life when things were called because they were staying up watching. And then I spent the day in the hospital with a friend who is currently having an emergency procedure done. So a lot of my feels have not been processed because I was immediately redirected into caring for somebody else. So I'm still
family emergencies
processing.
Also, I redirected most of my feelings into donuts, so there are worse options that other people might have done. But I think caring for others and donuts are probably pretty good choices.
It's true. I had a friend who sent me money on Grubhub because they texted and were like, hey, checking in. Yeah. And I was like, I don't even know. I don't know food. I don't know anything. And they were like, can we, Grubhub DoorDash you something? And so they ended up sending me a gift card, and that's how my friend and I ate in the waiting room of the ER on Wednesday night, which is a profound thing. There are also people that in 2016 we were living very close to each other, and so comparatively, and we got breakfast together, and they got me breakfast on the day after, and we talked. So this is a
flashback.
It's a little bit of I had several flashbacks over the course of Tuesday and Wednesday, but it's also a reminder of people who care, right? That there are people who are stress baking, and there are people who are doing all of that stuff, and then sharing it, because I think right now it is helpful to know that I am not alone, and it is easier for me to do that now than 8 years ago when I was living by myself in rural Minnesota. But there is definitely a lot of I know that emotions will continue to come, but there's legitimate fear, there's anger, there's frustration, there's betrayal, there's resignation, right? There's all of the things, because some of this is, like you said, not surprising. I was talking to Lenny Duncan in 2016, the day of or the day before or something, and they had said that they thought Trump was going to win. And they said something else, since then about, that Trump would win again. And I think it was before 2020. And then Biden was elected. And then, it just feels like they have been prophetic in ways that I think the most marginalized in our country have seen the writing on the wall and have known that this was coming. Even as others of us have been unwilling to admit that, or I'm in Baltimore, Maryland. We went very, very blue. And so there's a limit to how much I'm aware of the rest of the country, even as we have very red spots, and I have people I love in very red spots in this state. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I live in the only state that never voted for Reagan, and yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yet there are plenty of places that...
And as we come out of this, of course, there was sexism and racism involved in all of this, but also I think the people I'm going to wind up being angriest at in the next 4 years are going to be the people who just didn't vote, because the lack of turnout was such at the heart of what happened.
Yeah, lack of turnout was huge. And there was a Daily Show thing that we'll link to in the episode description that a friend of the podcast, Susanna, shared with our family, that really got into it and I said this about Michigan. Michigan is what happens when you don't care about genocide being perpetrated against Palestinians. Because a lot of what happened in Michigan has a very large Arab American population. And I think for me, the thing that is most frustrating is that the most progressive parts of the Democratic Party and of the country have been pushing for very popular stuff, right? We saw the majority of ballot measures or constitutional amendments around abortion access and reproductive justice passed.
Yeah.
Florida didn't pass because they changed the rules and required 60% instead of just a majority. Over 50% of Floridians voted for it. And minimum wage was increased when it was on the ballot. There are very progressive policies that people really want, and there has been such a push from the Democratic Party writ large to try to be centrist and to try to appeal to conservative politics and people. And we won't get into all of that because we don't need to, but that abandonment of ideals and of like the progressive part is a huge part of why there was so little turnout.
My husband said he saw a poll where they asked if the Democratic Party pushed for a arms embargo against Israel, would that make you more likely to vote for them? And somewhere between 30 and 40% of people said yes. And then they asked, would the Democrats not doing a arms embargo on Israel make you more likely to vote for them? And the answer was not significant. Like, no one went that way. And so what happened was they left votes on the table because they know that they have popular policy options and they don't implement them because they try to reach across the table to people who don't want to work with them anyway.
Yeah. And for the record, I voted for Kamala Harris. And I specifically responded whenever they asked me if I was definitely voting for her. I said no. In the primaries, I voted uncommitted because of the genocide against Palestine. And at one point, they asked me to fill out a survey. And so when I went to fill out the survey, there was nowhere for me to say, this is why I am not a committed, decidedly committed to Kamala Harris. There was nowhere to say that. It was just a survey about what do you love most and will you give us money? And that's not how you get that's not how you get votes. It's just not. No. In Maryland, I have to be registered with a party in order to vote in the primary, and so I am. But it's just frustrating when there has been writing on the walls. People have been trying to say this. The progressive people in parties and in the country have been trying to say this, and it's been ignored. And probably what is going to happen is people are going to try and blame Harris or Biden. And the reality is, yes, there is some blame because they are the head of the party and we're not doing this thing, but
the buck stops there.
Right. But also, it's about how people have been organizing, and that is what needs to shift dramatically in this country in the coming years. Is we need to have a shift in what it looks like to organize and to really actually ask people what their concerns are and address them.
Right. And abandon this whole concept of people getting to have a turn to run for president.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. We need much more grassroots organizing, and that's what needs to be invested in. And I hope that they do it, but it's easier to just blame other people. So,
yeah. Also, as someone living in Minnesota, I would just like to send a warm and heartfelt shout out to Governor Tim Walz, who is a lovely human being and who I am delighted to still have as my governor as one tiny piece of silver lining to all of this.
I mean, yes, and yeah, imperfect person.
Yeah. Everyone is. But in terms of finding yourself a politician who is actually likable and seems like a human being, it is remarkable how difficult that is to do, and yet.
Yeah, he does hit both of those, and has apologized for some of the ways that he has caused harm.
Oh, yeah,
particularly in 2020, which is a big deal. Yeah. So, yeah, those are just the starts of our feels, and I'm sure that you all, our dear listeners, our dear nerdlings, I know, I'm still trying to get that to go.
And I love that for you.
Thank you. Those are just some of our initial feels, and I think it's important to share that because, on Facebook it is, okay, now we do this, now we do this, now we do this. And also, it's okay this week, this moment, to be in your feels. Yes, we need to prep, and yes, we need to do things, but he is not the president right now.
Right.
There are things that we can do between now and January. Which, speaking of which, tips and tricks. Look at that transition.
I'm so proud of you.
It's a miracle. Thank you. Thank you.
So, not for any particular reason, but I feel like this just seems to be a good time to say that when in doubt, it is always a bad plan to announce your intention to do a crime on the internet. Please don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Please especially don't do that on our posts. We love you, but please don't do that. Especially on social media, which, like, the people who own social media are billionaires who don't want the best for you anyway, so keep that in mind.
Yep. And this includes musings about, in Lutheran tradition, pulling a Bonhoeffer, shall we say. There are ways to resist, and important ways to resist, some of which involve risking arrest, and some of which do not. And almost none of those actually take place on social media and are organized on social media. There are ways to get...
A lot of them aren't even organized.
Also true. There are ways to get involved. And sometimes you can find out via social media or email lists, but don't advertise it because that puts everybody at risk. Like, yes, it puts you at risk, but it also puts everybody else who is trying to do that work at risk. A great way to do some of that organizing is through secure encrypted messaging. As of this recording, I know of 2 encrypted messaging platforms. One is WhatsApp, which is owned by Facebook. So you can use it, and I know a lot of people use it, especially for international communication. And also, it is owned by Facebook. So the extent to which your information is actually secure feels less than something like Signal, which is nonprofit run and is end-to-end encryption. You can do disappearing messages. You can do all sorts of stuff. There are still ways to get into Signal. If somebody steals your phone and can get into your phone and you have Signal on your phone, then they'll have access to stuff. But I use the Signal app and have for about 8 years now.
Yeah, I downloaded it on Wednesday myself.
Yep. Yeah, when you texted me on Signal, I was like, hey! Welcome to the club. Yeah. And Signal, like, you gotta look at the settings and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, we may be doing a minisode on how to keep Signal secure, because I am not an expert on internet cybersecurity, etc., but I know some people who knows things, and we're going to try to see if we can gather some information on that. Also, I wanted to point out, I'm not a huge history expert, but I know a bunch of history experts, and in terms of what is the best way to offer resistance in a real, concrete way that you may actually be faced with, if you are asked to do something, it is remarkable how unhelpful you can be by just playing dumb. Like, honestly, being incompetent, allowing yourself to look like someone who doesn't know what's going on or can barely string together a sentence, losing paperwork, adding friction to the daily lives of the people who are doing the terrible things. All of that stuff can be incredibly helpful and is actually at the center, historically speaking, of a lot of resistance movements. It wasn't so much about doing the big heroic stuff and moving weapons and fighting and being in movies. It was about just frustrating the living crap out of the people who were trying to do the stuff that is horrible. Because the more frustrated they get, the more likely they get to quit. So,
or to mess up themselves. Malicious compliance is a thing. If you haven't heard about it and you want to know,
there is a subreddit on malicious compliance that will tell you stories that often are actually remarkably heartwarming in various ways because of the reasons why people want to tell those stories. But yeah, no, if you want to explore different ways that you can be a part of making sure that this stuff doesn't happen as fast as it has to, at least, that's a wonderful idea.
And Kay mentioned this, that we're thinking about doing a minisode on how to best get Signal to best work and be secure for you. But we're also thinking about just doing some minisodes more about various things. Among them, if you have feels that you want to share somewhere, whether it's an audio clip that you want to share, like just speak into the world, or if you want to text or email, if you send them to us with like clarity on how you want them shared or not shared, We are happy to do everything from summarize them to play your audio clip, whatever you'd like, to help us know that we're not alone and to help us collectively share our feelings with each other and find those moments of resonance, and to do some minisodes like that, but also to do some minisodes not only for Signal, but also maybe for malicious compliance, or what those different things can look like in a very hypothetical situation.
Of course. And we'll probably also wind up outlining things you totally wouldn't want to do, because they would be illegal and wrong.
Yeah, we'll definitely let you know what not to do. So if there are topics that you want to know about, if there are questions that you have, let us know. Certainly we're thinking about how this impacts our next season as well, but there are some guests that we can have come on and help inform folks of what all is going on, of what they might want to know, of best practices, tips and tricks, all of that stuff. We are Nerds at Church, and we want to be nerdy to help you the best we can.
Because we care about you, and we love you, and we are here, and we will still be here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd also like to point out, I know a lot of people are talking about leaving America because of this. A lot of people talked about it 8 years ago, too. I was there for that.
Mm-hmm.
Most people can't.
Mm-hmm. And particularly most of the people who are most at risk under a second Trump presidency are the ones who can't leave. Part of how we got here is that we have been caring about ourselves as individuals or our immediate family, and not thinking about how we use our own power, our own privilege to protect and support others with less power and less privilege. We did a whole series, right? Mutual aid. It is about the fact that our whole futures are bound up together.
Because we are on one very tiny spinning rock in the universe, and we are stuck here for the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So, I also want to point out, I've seen a number of posts on Facebook of people saying, if you voted for Trump, unfriend me. And I wanted to be very clear. I totally understand that sentiment. I get it. I have been there with people who I cared about deeply and who I found out didn't so much care about me. I will not personally be posting one of those, because part of my understanding of my call is that this is what I volunteered for.
Mm-hmm.
That part of my job is reaching out to people who don't care about the people I care about in order to try to open their hearts to more empathy and compassion. That is what I get paid for. And it is difficult, and it means that I can't choose what I get to talk about every day. But I think it's important. And also, I've seen it work. Like, it happens. Not quickly, not as thoroughly as we might like, but it does happen, and sometimes in remarkably surprising ways. So if you need to take a break from social media, if you need to take a break from certain people in your life, I totally get that. I support that. Self-care is important. If you see me not doing that, it's because this is my job.
Yeah. Yep. And that's a decision that we can't make for you, right? Like, this is, as Kay said, this is Kay's job. This is her job. And Kay and I, in many ways, have the same job and also have different jobs. Both of us are called and ordained pastors in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, the whitest denomination in this country, still. And Kay can go places that I can't. And Kay has gifts that I don't. And I have gifts that Kay doesn't. And so the ways that we live that out, the ways that we live out a public ministry, a public calling, and ways of being in relationship with people look different. And they both are important. So you have your own calling as a person, as a human in this world. For those of you who are Christian, we get our vocations from baptism and our baptismal callings. So there's a lot of diversity in what this looks like. And at a bare minimum, I think this looks like trying to survive.
Yeah, and trying to help each other survive.
Yep, and if we can survive and help each other survive, we're in a much better place to take the next steps, to resist, to do the long, slow organizing work to make this world actually a better place.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, oh my gosh, I'm full of transitions. We are in our superhero spectacular season right now. It is
fabulous.
Right? Love it. We came up with this season a long time ago. What feels like a lifetime ago, thanks to some brilliant ideas from Susanna. And we've been working on it for far closer to a year than I anticipated when we started thinking about it. And part of the prompting for this season was thinking about the ways in the beginning of the pandemic that healthcare workers and essential workers of all stripes were called heroes. And what ended up happening is it meant that they were expendable. And so Kay and I have talked a lot about wanting to kind of deconstruct the dominant cultural way of thinking about heroes as one person who is perfect and can do all of the things and who can sacrifice their life for everybody else. And shifting to thinking about heroes in more realistic ways and to thinking about what actually makes up a hero. And we've been doing that and we'll continue to do that. But the election, as you said, Kay, that this season feels extra relevant with the election results.
Yeah, it feels like talking about how heroes work, actually, like both in the real world and in pop culture and in biblical history. All of that shows us how we can be heroes, not in the superpowered caped kind of way, or not even in the superpowered non-caped kind of way, thank you, Edna Mode, but in the everyday, ordinary, boring kind of way. Like, I feel like part of America's problem is that we try to ignore so much of the boring parts of life that we wind up getting hooked on adrenaline and on endorphins and trying to ignore everything that doesn't get us that. And that's how we wind up not caring about other people. That's how we wind up ignoring people in need. That's how we wind up getting calloused to how we treat each other and how we talk about each other. And as a person who went through a lot of stages in life where excitement and adrenaline were not necessarily good or happy things in my life, I have sought out a quiet and boring and pleasantly calm and relaxing life on purpose. And so when I think about being a hero, I don't focus on the big, flashy, exciting stuff. I focus on the how can I remember to ask this person how they're doing today. I focus on the how can I offer someone a moment of kindness when they need it, and how can I tell that they're in the place of needing it, as opposed to like 3 days ago when they totally looked like they needed it, but what they actually needed was more caffeine because their coffee had run out that morning. Or how can I do little ordinary things to help prop up the people around me, because we all need that help sometimes. And most of us, even in the next 4 years, aren't going to face big, dramatic moments of truth and justice in the American way, but most of us will have chances to help others. And it's going to be inconvenient, it's going to be awkward as all get out, it's going to be emotional and kind of weird, and sometimes you're going to have the option to help, and that's what matters.
Indeed. And I think that's the piece of, I don't know, it's been really fascinating for me to be in relationship with you, Kay, for, I don't know, how many years?
I did the math, actually, because we started talking in 2017, in fall of 2017, so it's been 7 years.
Yeah, and I think, like, it's been really interesting to watch you in the way that you do ministry, which has taken a variety of forms, both of us, actually, over the last 7 years, but to watch you do ministry that is the stuff of grassroots organizing, like you're saying, that is the talking to people about what is going on in their lives in this moment, and to see the spaces where, because of your call to rural ministry in very, very purple / magenta congregations, the impact that has made, right? Of people getting to a point where they are questioning why police killed someone, or to be able to have the conversations about, you know, why is healthcare still so expensive? Or why is something not working the way we thought it would or could or should? Or what does it mean to love people who are different from us? And how do we do that?
I mean, my personal favorite example is still the question of why is it 2024 and the best option that people who use walkers have is to buy tennis balls to put on the bottom of their walkers. I just, that has been my question for years now.
Right, yeah, for sure. And I think but all of those things, right, I don't think I've ever told you, but I really admire the way you live out your call and the impact that has, because I know it is something that I could never do, and it is something that we desperately need, and we don't have enough people who do that.
Yeah, I will say that a decent chunk of why I can do it is because it turns out that people who live in rural areas, a lot of them can bake, and so that really helps. Like, even if I'm kind of irritated at them for some reason, like, half the time they turn up with baked goods, and, that smooths everything over so well. I can't even begin to tell you. But yeah, and from my side of things, it has been unbelievably heartening to be able to talk with someone on a regular basis who lives in a completely different setting and life, and in a place where so many things are validated and lifted up and considered and given weight in ways that I don't really get to experience on a daily basis. And I am reminded that people who care about these things exist on a regular basis, and that is because I get to hear your stories, and because I get to meet the people who you know. And that has been wonderful, and also just unbelievably life-giving in the last 7 years particularly, as you might imagine. So
yeah. So this season feels extra important and relevant now, and we love and appreciate each other, obviously.
Absolutely.
But also...
And we also love and appreciate you, and we would love to hear from you.
Exactly.
We do.
We love you, our listeners. We know we have shifted away from the lectionary, and there are a fair number of preachers who have shifted away, and we love you. We're still here. We appreciate all of you who listen to this podcast and talk about us and share with your parishioners, with your friends, with your Bible studies, with your book groups. The hope of our podcast is to make some of the big, fancy theological stuff more accessible, but also to help broaden what it means to be faithful and deepen what it means to be faithful. And we're doing it in different ways than we did in our first and second iterations of podcasting. And we're doing it in ways that feel life-giving and important. So we love you. We appreciate you. We're still here, and we will still be here. And we still value your participation with us and the ways that you engage with the world. And we love your feedback. We know podcast listeners are not like the most ready with feedback. Maybe partly because you might be listening to us while driving in a car, and we don't want you to give us feedback while driving in a car, because that's dangerous.
Thank you.
But we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear what you're worried about, what your feels are, what your thoughts are, what your worries are, what your questions are, because we want to be able to help in this moment, and that is one of the things that we can do.
Right. And speaking of being able to help in this moment, our next season, season 6, we have been planning for a while to have that focus on health and health care. And lo and behold, it turns out that that's going to be an incredibly relevant topic for the next 4 years. And, we're not planning on season 6 lasting 4 years. Let's just be very clear about that. But
definitely not.
It might feel like 4 years, depending on how things go. But it'll be a wonderful season. We're really looking forward to it. We have some exciting plans. And as you might imagine, we will be approaching this topic with an eye to the complexity of how things work out and how the various prejudices and isms of the world impact it. But, of course, we're also going to, I assume, wind up talking about how this new administration in the United States is going to be affecting healthcare. And so if you have particular expertise in an area of healthcare, we would love to hear from you. If you have particular expertise because you are on the patient side of things in a particular area of healthcare, we would love to hear from you. And we are in the process of figuring out what that season's going to be like. But this is just another way that we can be here and be nerdy and talk about the church and the Bible with all of you.
Yeah.
And we promise that we will give very careful content warnings for discussion of, squishy things, because that will be an important part of talking about healthcare. So.
Yes, squishy things. I love squishy things. Yes. And I think there's a lot of, hesitancy for folks about, a podcast from the church is going to talk about health and healthcare. And to be perfectly queer, we are not interested in being ableist or fatphobic in how we do this. And we are, in fact, actively working to name and address and question and challenge the ways that ableism and fat phobia, misogyny, racism, all of those combine and impact health, right? That this is not a podcast that is going to say you have to have a BMI to be healthy because BMIs are eugenicist and awful, right?
And that's probably going to be a podcast episode, but yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that is its own podcast episode, but
I will do my best to make sure that half of it isn't just me screaming into the void, but no promises.
No promises on no screaming into the voids for any of us, but we are going to do our best on this, and if/when we fail because we are human, please tell us and we will correct. But also we are going to do our best to do this well, because we don't know anybody else who has done it well. So somebody's got to.
I mean, hey, if you know a podcast that talked about healthcare in a way that actually, made sense and applied to real life, great, please tell us about it, because I have to tell you, the number of, trying to search for that kind of thing on the internet, especially now that AI is supposedly trying to help us, oh my goodness, it's terrible.
So not helpful,
So
AI.
we are not having any luck finding good stuff, so please tell us about it if you found any.
Yeah. Otherwise, we will do the research to find it for you. Yeah. So, as a reminder, if you have thoughts, feelings, questions, concerns, we would love to know about them. We would love to know about them so that we together can hold this weird and confusing and bizarro space. We would love to know about them so that we can share them with others if you want. If you just want to share it with us and you're like, I don't want you to talk about it, or I don't want you to share this more broadly, that's fine. We, as pastors, understand confidentiality, and
absolutely,
we want to support you as you.
If you cannot put your thoughts into words, we would love to see pictures of fuzzy animals in or not in your life. And you can also send us pictures of gifts that you feel best capture the emotions that you're feeling at this time. And if we need to, lower our sound on our devices before we open those gifts, please just let us know in advance.
Yes. But please let us know. We want to be able to adapt and support you all and our larger Nerds at Church Diaconia.faith community in the best ways that we can. And this feels to us like a way that we can support in new ways. So we are excited to do that, and maybe we'll make some minisodes about that stuff. And, if nobody sends anything, then maybe we won't, but we'll probably at least do Signal because that feels important to us. But yeah.
And now that we have officially made it so that this is not a minisode, we would just like to say one more time that we care about you, we love you, and we are here, even if we're on a slightly slower timeline than usual, but these things happen, and we are still working on it. So, I believe, as the ancient Christian said,
Pax vobiscum.